Hello, dominants and submissives. I'm Master Zon from Ontario, and today is our first actual interview. Today we're going to be doing an interview with a furry and a friend of mine that I met at a local munch. I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a second. But the last interview that we did was a test. I'm sorry I didn't get around to fixing the audio for it, but I'm just carrying on with the next one, so.
Hello, I am Brandon. I've been a furry for going on 11 years now. The community is very interesting when you're invited to it at 13. I'll get into that in a bit, though.
Okay, so let's just jump right in then to the questions.
Sounds good.
So what exactly is a furry? Like, what does it take to be a furry?
So, a furry at its base is someone who finds the appearance of an anthropomorphic animal attractive and just admits to it. There's levels to being a furry. Like, there's the fursuiters, who are the ones that go to the conventions. They spend a very fancy sum of money on a suit to look like the character that they identify as. Some people have multiple characters that they do online role play as. It's a wide variety of interests, but to be a furry, all you really have to do is be attracted to what they look like.
And what exactly kind of furry are you? Or do you have one picked, or?
So it's kind of evolved over the years. It's much like your sexuality and sexual interests. It evolves with you. Sometimes you grow out of it, sometimes not. For me, I have stuck with canines and owls as like my preference for myself. It's kind of like when you're young, you pick an animal that most identifies with you, and that's what you feel comfortable as. And to add the furry aspect to it, it's just whatever you feel represents you best. And as a
As a dom still, pet play as a wild wolf, so I get what you mean for that.
True. And pet play is actually one of the things that is very interesting in the furry community, because if you are role-playing as an animal, then the pet play adds a whole other, like, predator-prey, or who is the top animal in the situation, right? So that is a very interesting dynamic.
My wife's a husky.
Fair. And see, that one, that would be like domesticated versus a feral animal, which, yeah. For me, it's just been, wolves are a representation of ferocity, but not willing. Like, a wolf is not something that will jump at something the first moment; it'll observe first. So that's always something that's clicked with me. And wolves and owls, to me, are both patient predators, but also not outwardly aggressive all the time. But
What was it, or when was it, that you first thought this might be something that you were interested in or might like to try doing?
So when I was 13, a friend's brother that I used to hang out with a lot was very open about being a furry. He was very open about sexuality in general, which I thank him for, because my sex education was just terrible.
As is lots of them now.
Unfortunately. But no, he opened my eyes to a lot of, like, things that I wouldn't have thought about. Like, we never did anything, so that's a disclaimer. But he was very open about teaching people, and then he was explaining to me, like, how his origin of being a furry was just the attraction to the made Marion in the Robin Hood remake with the foxes and stuff. I'm like, that's hilarious because of the amount of anthropomorphized animals in Disney things. I'm like, how many other people have been like, hey, this is attractive and I don't know why. So like, it goes from Lion King to
me and Six. We check out everything that we come across. We try out everything, but at one point we were going through a whole bunch of different hentai mangas.
right.
And we see this cute little bunny and this fox, and I've always called her my little honey bunny. And
Right.
so we sort of took on those characters for us for play for a little bit. And then one day my niece and nephew come over and they put on the movie Zootopia, and there's the bunny and the fox, so gave us a whole different dimension to watching the movie.
Zootopia is actually a really funny one because it was pretty much advertised by the majority of furries, and it was specifically planned from Disney. Like, it was meant to be a general audience, so they had jokes for everyone in it, right? And I personally think that Zootopia is going to be the new wave of furry causer because there's some animation choices that are just specific, to say the least.
I got a few stills with different captions on my Facebook and on my school server.
Does not
Some
show.
of them are just great.
Yeah.
I've always said that kink and BDSM and fetishism is coming more into mainstream faster and faster.
100%.
Do you interact with the community at large where you are, or what's it like where you are for being a furry?
So, interacting with the community at large is somewhat difficult depending on like your income because, like I said earlier, the fursuiters specifically spend a lot on their suits, and the convention centers they use are usually in Toronto and stuff, so it's depending on travel if you can get there. I've always wanted to go, but as somewhat a casual person in the community, I don't know if it's the environment I want to be in, but it always looks like a fun time. Personally, where I am, I more associate with the online role play because it's more so tied to the mentality and discovery of yourself, and that's what has always stuck me to the community, so it's where I stick to. So there's not really a need to be in person with the community because the community is online in the majority anyway.
One day I'll have to introduce you to my friend Polymaster Brian. He's running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign right now, I think.
Furries and Dungeons and Dragons are a very interesting mix.
I could see that. I actually have a bunch of first edition Monster Manual, player handbook.
Wow.
Yeah, I got a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Almost all of it.
Damn. I mean, it is definitely, it's something like furries where I've grown up with it and I'm like, this is tied to my identity now.
Well, I think part of the attraction is the same thing that's the attraction of kink, where it's the ability to fulfill a fantasy in a way without worry about the consequences or being judged for what your character is doing.
100%.
A chance to just explore possibilities without actually taking the risk of exploring them like you do in real life.
That, and it's also a group dynamic, so you also have to take into consideration of how your actions will affect everyone, so it's a really good communication builder at that too.
Well, like I said at the start, I had first met you at one of the local munches here.
Yep.
Do you do any other type of group activity within the furry community or any?
So I currently am staying with a friend who is also casual furry like me. But because of where I live right now, it's pretty hard to get a gathering. There was a fair few furries at the North Bay Pride last year, though. I was ecstatic to see that.
We were there. My daughter still has her pride shirt.
That's awesome. That was a rough day. The heat was.
Do you remember the guy in the dog hood?
Yeah, Kobe.
Yeah, he's actually the one on the other interview that I did, the test interview. He did a reading for the library in the YMCA called the Consent Story Hour.
Right.
Boy, did I get flack for taking a picture of them with my daughter.
Oh.
But I had to ask, like, well, what age do you start teaching to accept other people? Are you suggesting that you teach otherwise and then try to undo that later? Or?
See, I've always hated the idea that a person is too young to learn something. I think there's levels as to what they should learn. Like, for instance, I learned about sexuality because I found a magazine and I got curious. Like, I knew what it was enough to, like, have feelings about it because it was in the throes of puberty. But, like, as a kid, would I have preferred to know what the hell I was getting into beforehand with puberty? Absolutely. Because, as we all know, puberty is not kind to some people.
But having the ability and the knowledge helps, I find, at that stage, too.
Oh, definitely.
But people were even saying that my daughter was too young, she was 1.5 then, to bring her around men in drag or women in drag. It's like, what? They're people. Like,
Yeah.
Do you ever get any real feedback for being a furry, or?
I haven't received flack personally, but, like, there's always a stigma around the community because of the unfortunate few that have been tied to the community that have identified as furries. As most conventions, there's always predatory people that are among the people there, right?
Just like with everything else, you have to vet your partners and watch out for red flags.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Vanilla relationship, BDSM, Gorin, furry, all of them. They all need the vetting and.
Yeah, 100%. I wish the security on things was a bit tighter in both the online community and in person. Just because I know there are some young people who have gotten mixed in with things that they shouldn't have been. Like sexual relations that should not be happening. Things like that. But all in all, the community is basically, it's like kink, where people typically get flack for just being not in the status quo, but that's also slowly changing because the community of furries is also showing that it's not just sexual. Like, there's no reason to judge somebody on something unless they prove that they are a danger to another person, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like with everything else, it is what the people say it is. If you don't want it to be sexual, it's not. If you want it to be, it is. It's like any other kink relationship or vanilla relationship. It's a give and take. Like, BDSM does not have to involve whips and chains and pain.
Yeah.
Or it can if the participants want to. It's all about what the individuals in it want and consent to.
Exactly. Like, there's a massive community that's completely non-sexual, and they're just in it for the art. Like, there's plenty of anime where there's characters that are animalistic, and, like, people relate to that. Exactly. That was a classic, and, like, I loved it before I was even, like, fully a furry. But it's just something that people enjoy. Like, I wouldn't give anyone flack for liking an anime character.
My daughter's name is Sakura, after Cardcaptor Sakura.
Yeah. Like, it's just something that people find interest in, and it's like a hobby or a lifestyle. If you're not in it, why judge it?
Is there any advice that you would give to somebody who was thinking about entering the furry community, or who is a furry wanting to come out? Any advice you can offer to anybody?
For someone coming into the community, it all depends on age and what they want out of it. For just general entry, I would suggest looking at the website furaffinity.net.